Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. How are you feeling after your exertions on Saturday morning?
Yeah, I'm tired. It's fair to say I am tired because I'll get into the exertions in a minute. But I stayed up late last night to watch the golf, the Masters, the end of the Masters.
Yes.
And for a while, it looked as if British golfer Rory McIlroy was going to throw it away. But in the end, Irish golfer Rory McIlroy won the tournament. So it was all good. It was worth staying up for. Exciting stuff.
I heard it was very exciting,
Yeah.
actually. Not my game, but I heard it was very exciting.
But the exertions, yes, I am feeling it pretty much all over. Hamstring, I think I did something to my hamstring. Did something to my ankle. I have a big hole in my foot from bad socks. And I got a big blister, which was not very pleasant. You know, the way the bits of skin fall off and stuff.
Horrific. We should say what this was in aid of.
Well, we, for years, have had an Arseblog five-a-side tournament. We haven't had it for quite a while, but years and years running, we had this Arseblog five-a-side tournament where we had 5 teams. We had white, red, blue, yellow, and green. And we would have a great time. Play five-a-side, have some beers together, go to a game. It was all very good, and it was a great part of the community. But for various reasons, it hasn't happened for quite a while, for quite a number of years.
It was like a forerunner for the Ballers League.
I don't know what the Ballers League is.
I think it's like... I've just exposed my age because I don't really know. But I think basically a sort of influencer-led football league. To be absolutely nightmarish. So I was joking.
Right.
It was not a forerunner for the Ballers League.
Okay. Not too many influencers
No.
on the pitch for us. Influencing the game itself, but not anything beyond that. This time around, we only had 3 teams, a sort of green and a red and a white team. And it was good. It was great fun. Beautiful day. You were there at Market Road pitches. The sun was shining. The quality of the football, you couldn't take your eyes off it. I could see you on the sidelines just aghast, your mouth agape. Couldn't believe the quality on show.
Yeah. It was difficult. People spoke about the atmosphere against Brentford and it maybe not being quite what it was against Madrid. And I understand that perspective, but you've got to remember, about 15 of the fans in that stadium had been watching the Arseblog five-a-sides on the Saturday morning. So that was in itself a real come down to then go and watch these supposed professionals playing after watching the absolute elite competition we witnessed.
This is
earlier that day.
It's hard, isn't it? Once you've had the caviar, it's difficult to go back to sausage, as Arsene Wenger once said. But
exactly that. But yes, you didn't come off worse. We should send a get well relatively soon message to friend of the show, Neil.
Again, the man with the giant cup display.
From the highs of the cup snake in the Emirates concourse to the lows of a ruptured Achilles tendon.
Within the first couple of minutes, with nobody anywhere near him. Oof, painful.
It's weird as well, Andrew, because he went through such a rigorous warm-up.
Honestly.
Like the pro he is.
That's it. Yeah, he was there a good hour doing his stretching and everything else. But
but yeah, terrible bad fortune for him. Commiserations. Just as his magical sort of serpentine cup tower was a positive omen for the first leg in Madrid, let's hope his destroyed Achilles is not a negative omen.
Oh gosh, yeah. Let's hope not. Let's hope not. But all in all,
we've got some history with Achilles in Madrid as well.
That's right, Lauren Koscielny. We were talking about that at the weekend, weren't we? When obviously Achilles were on our minds given what happened at the tournament. But yeah, the Lauren Koscielny Achilles rupture in the Europa League semi-final against Atletico Madrid at the Metropolitano.
Please, no more Achilles ruptures this week.
No.
And get well soon, Neil.
Yes, get well soon. May your cups be reaching the roof again soon. That's all we can say.
I promise that somewhere within the bowels of the Bernabeu on Wednesday night, I will be mind-sweeping round the press room, collecting people's discarded coffee cups and attempting to recreate the beautiful tower that you built for us on Tuesday
You
night.
certainly won't get into any trouble with the Spanish police if you do that. That's all I'm saying.
No, I can't imagine so. I think it'll be really... I think they'll really appreciate it, have a good sense of humour, and probably be listeners to the pod and understand why I'm doing it.
Exactly. Because I remember when I was there in 2006, and you get held in right after the game, as is normal. But then they were trying to get us all out through this kind of one small stairwell, and it was getting a bit crushy. Actually, it was a little bit dangerous. And I remember saying, they had the guys there, the police guys, I don't know if it was Guardia Civil or whoever it was, but I sort of said to them in Spanish, maybe you could let us down there because it's a bit dangerous here. And he just sort of put his hand on his baton and went, huh? And I was going, it's a bit dangerous, like people could get hurt. He was like, huh? Just sort of like... keep talking and you're going to get a crack at this in the head. So it's like, okay, I see where we stand with this. Let's just hope everybody can funnel out without any problems. But we did, thankfully, and it was a great night in Madrid, and we'll hope, obviously, that we can have another great night in Madrid. Even if we don't have to win, it could still be a great night in Madrid.
That's true. Fingers crossed. I fly back quite early Thursday morning, but hopefully... I've been out all night.
Yeah, that's it. No point going to sleep. There is no point going to sleep.
So then you were over for the Brentford game.
I was over for the Brentford game. My favourite thing...
What a game to be at. The game of the season, they're calling it.
That's it. My favourite thing was there was a family sitting behind me who are actually listeners and readers. They bought each other Goodly Morning mugs for Christmas presents.
Wow.
But they had their two small boys with them. For one of them, it was his first ever game at Arsenal. It was a bit of a shame it didn't end in a win. I thought that was going to be a lucky charm, but turned out not to be. But the older of the two young lads was a vociferous booer of all things Brentford. It was great. It was great. When they announce a substitution, they go, going off, number 17, Keane Lewis Potter. Everyone goes, who? He was just like, boo! And when they announced, whoever's coming on, everyone goes, who? He was, boo! Yeah. So that was very, very entertaining, I have to say.
He knew who they were and he disapproved.
Yes, absolutely. He was having none of their Brentfordness. That's all I can say.
Booing is very funny, I think. It's kind of underrated how funny booing things can be.
I think it's funny when it's a kid, but it's even more funny when it's kind of a grown adult doing it. You know what I mean? Just like, boo! Boo! But anyway.
It's sort of enjoyably polite and childlike, I guess.
Yes, I guess so. You know what, though?
I met a few people who were kind of over for the game, or some people had come to play in the five-a-side, hadn't they, specifically then for the game. And I sort of, yourself among them. And I kind of willed the game to be more of a thing, like more important, more stakes.
Sure.
More atmos. But alas, it could not really be achieved.
No, I don't think so. I wasn't, going into the game expecting the same kind of atmosphere as Arsenal versus Real Madrid on Tuesday night. Far from it. I was, when the five-a-sides were being organised, hoping that this game would be a little more high stakes than it was in terms of the Premier League. But it is what it is, and we've come to terms with that. I will say, the going to games and trying to remember what happened in games, and this has got nothing to like 2 beers before the game, so it wasn't a question of anything else. But remembering the details of the games that you're at versus the details of the games that you sort of work at, like when I'm doing live blog and stuff like that, I find it more difficult when I'm actually there.
Tell me about it.
But
I'm doing that,
Well, I was going to say, I'm very impressed by your powers of recall.
Thanks, man. That's why I have to have a little file on my phone.
Yeah, your little notes.
What happened? Oh, yeah.
I guess it does help if there is a lot of stuff that goes on in a game that's worth remembering. And in this particular one, there wasn't a great deal, it's fair to say.
What's nice, if you're at a game, you kind of want it to be like 5-0 or something, because you're like, by the time we've analysed all the goals, that's probably the podcast. Whereas with this, it's like, there's quite a lot of sort of like quite grindy stuff that we have to remember and get through.
Yeah. I mean, the team selection was one with, like Everton last week, with Madrid in mind, right? There were some decisions that were forced by, I guess, injury or whatever else, but certainly a team selection that had an eye on midweek and maybe also a little nod to what some of those players did in midweek in terms of the effort they put in against Real Madrid in that first game.
Yeah.
No Ben White.
No Ben White, a knock in training, we're told. So, don't know the details on that. Hopefully it's a light knock. You know, like the kind of knock a doctor does on your knee to check your reflexes.
Oh, yeah, the old little hammery job.
Yeah, not like a sledgehammer, but like a little doctor's hammer.
Yes.
Is what I'm hoping.
That's fine. I guess we could live with that if that's all it is. Fingers crossed. But, you know, his absence, I think, had an impact on team selection in that he clearly needed or wanted to give Jurrien Timber a bit of a break.
Yeah.
In ideal circumstances, that means you play Ben White. But without Ben White, it meant Thomas Partey had to start, which perhaps wasn't ideal. When you see what happened later on, I don't mean his goal, obviously, but he went off. We don't know if he's injured or not injured, really. Mikel Arteta said he felt something. So, you know, these kind of little knock-on effects of you know, a training ground knock can be quite something.
Yeah, that did feel like a kind of late decision, you know. I don't... Thomas Partey, I think I'm right in saying, didn't start at Everton, and I think they would have liked to rest him for this one. It meant William Saliba, of course, starting. I suppose one positive is William Saliba and Jakub Kiwior in the 11 got an opportunity to kind of work on their understanding, their partnership. First Premier League start for Kieran Tierney in about 2 years.
Wow.
And then ahead of that, Jorginho obviously came in. We had the lesser spotted Zinchenko in midfield. Ethan
Nwaneri on the right.
Gabriel Martinelli on the left, which was a little bit of a surprise, maybe. Given the amount of running he'll probably be expected to do across 2 Madrid games, but someone had to play. And Leandro Trossard through the middle.
Yes.
So, yeah. It was so. Was Mikel? Did Mikel Merino?
No, he came on. He came on
that's
later.
Right, that's
he
right.
came on
yes,
later.
Declan
So,
Rice
you know, it did feel very. I don't want to say underwhelming because I do think at times, you know, you could see the crowd trying to get behind the team and raise the team, and this sort of circular argument rather of, you know, is it the team that raises the crowd raises the team, etc., etc. But I think just what I felt. Anyway, was that pretty much everybody understood what this game was in the context of our season. I sort of include Brentford in that as well.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, do you think that what do you think that did for Brentford? Do you think that made them sense an opportunity? Or I thought they might be a little bit more...
I thought so too, yeah.
Aggressive.
Well, we'll come to a moment of aggression in a moment, yeah.
Yeah, but I suppose I meant tactically in that respect. I thought they might see us as a bit more vulnerable.
Yes, exactly the same. I thought the same. You know, they would have known they were going to face an Arsenal side that was on a high, I guess, after the Real Madrid game, but also one that was changed, weakened, you might say, a little bit, and also one that, potentially, and with an eye on the more important game in midweek. You know, for all the talk of focus on the game that's in front of us, and this is the only game that matters. Human nature is human nature, isn't it? You know what really matters and what, not that it doesn't matter, but there's, you know, on the scale of matter, this was kind of low.
Yeah, I think that's true. But, you know, they instead they came, they did a lot of defending. Thomas Frank spoke afterwards and said, oh, you know, felt we defended our box really well. So, yeah, it was a slightly odd occasion. I mean, the most striking difference in terms of sort of people's atmosphere and engagement with it for me was like the periods just before kickoff and just at the start of the second half, particularly. Against Madrid, the seats were full long before the second half restarted, and I came out for the second half. I think it was about 15 seconds late for it myself because I was just finishing my drink at half time, and I looked around and there's so many empty seats, and I basically think there was just a lot of conversations on the concourse about, so what team would you pick for Madrid? What I mean? I just think people's minds were elsewhere somewhat.
I think that's fair. And the weakened team, found it a bit difficult against Brentford or to make chances. I did notice one of the conversation I had with Chris, who I was sitting with at the game, was David Raya pumping it long to Leandro Trossard quite regularly in that first half.
That's interesting.
And there was, a size difference, I think it's fair to say, between Leandro Trossard and who did they have at the back? They had like three at the back, didn't they? They had Collins, Ayer, and was it Janelt?
Yeah.
It was just they would take turns bumping Trossard and just winning the headers. But it felt like instruction. It felt like something that he was being told to do. Maybe it's about winning the second ball higher up the pitch. I don't know. But I don't know if that was something you noticed.
Or just bypassing Brentford's press. They've shown themselves quite capable of that in the past. But I didn't actually particularly notice that myself. It does seem like a very odd tactic to employ. I guess they're just thinking, even if he doesn't win it, can Declan Rice kind of mop up those second balls? Or it was like an elaborate prank on Leandro Trossard.
He did something to annoy Mikel Arteta in training, and he instructed David Raya. Yeah, maybe so. He
thought, I'll show you. Yeah. Win this header against a 6'4" man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I thought we'd scored relatively early on, Andrew.
The Kieran Tierney one was about 25 minutes in. I was sort of directly in line with Kieran Tierney. So I celebrated at about 80%. I just felt when I saw it that maybe he was offside.
You had a semi-automated instinct that he was off.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he was. The decision came pretty quickly, it's fair to say. In the ground, I've been there at times when there's been a VAR check for an offside goal and it has taken a fucking age. This one was quite offside indeed. So it probably wasn't that difficult for the new software. But what I was expecting was the graphic to flash up on the big screen, which I didn't see. Somebody told me that it did go on the big screen. You told me it flashed up on the little small screen.
So where I'm stood in the North Bank...
Sit, you don't stand all day.
Oh, sorry. Where I'm sat throughout the game.
Never standing.
Respectfully.
Yes.
I actually crawled down the aisle to my seat.
Just
I don't want to get
slither like a snake.
Yeah. There's a screen, sort of, if you can imagine, sort of on the roof, effectively, or on the base of the upper tier, if that makes sense.
Sure.
A little screen, and that did show the kind of 3D generated graphic. Of Tierney being sort of sliced in half by the offside line. I
like the way you nearly called him Thierry there.
Well, it was such a good finish, Andrew.
It was a great header, actually. Really was.
Great cross, great header. Ethan Ranieri, I think, with the cross, and lovely little header. And you know what? I was a bit gutted because the Arsenal subs were warming up in front of me in that corner, and they were so palpably thrilled for Kieran Tierney when he scored that goal. Like, Bukayo Saka was actually on the pitch celebrating. He was so delighted. And then it was whisked away from him.
Taken away from him and taken away from us as well. Would have been a lovely moment, wouldn't it? For Tierney to score.
Shame.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, that was, I think we'd had a couple of moments before that from set pieces. There'd been a bit of threat. There was one when Partey headed the ball across the goal, but nothing came of it. After that, Zinchenko had a shot from the edge of the box that was going wide, but was saved anyway. I think. And then in the remainder of the half, the only thing I wrote in my notes was Trossard having a shot saved, I think, from the edge of the box.
That was quite smart play, actually, the way he just sort of threw a shape and went the other way and had a left-footed shot, which the keeper saved. But I think the thing we've bypassed is the challenge on Martinelli by Christian Norgard. Now, that was sort of on my side, close enough to not exactly where I was sitting. I was a bit more in line with the penalty area, but it was on that side. And when I saw it in real time, I thought, oh, fuck, that is a really bad tackle. And the ref very quickly gave a yellow card, and I could see Martinelli go down. And then I looked up and I saw Mikel Arteta going absolutely spare on the sideline. He went mad, like right up to the fourth official. So I presumed that they had seen something in the replay on the bench that made him react in that way. Having seen it again, I'm sure.
Yeah. Because to be honest, I didn't really see it. It was sort of the opposite corner of the pitch to me.
Yeah.
In real time, so I didn't have a great view of it.
Your view was obscured by Norgard himself flying in from behind.
Well, that's it. The angle of the tackle actually made it very difficult for me. It's a bad challenge, isn't it? And one that could have had quite serious repercussions, I think.
I think that should be a red card.
Yeah.
It's one of those where if a red card is given, there is absolutely no way that it gets overturned. No chance.
I certainly agree with that. Yep. I think it very well could be a red. Like,
he's off his feet and it's a tackle from behind with no real attempt to play the ball, and he sort of does the old scissors thing as well. That kind of tackle was outlawed in the 90s. They outlawed the challenge from behind years and years ago, and that was very much a challenge from behind, and it was hard and it was cynical and it was dangerous, and I think it should have been a red card, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I had chats with a couple of people who were like, oh, is it an orange, is it dark yellow? I mean, it's difficult to know what that really means, isn't it? It's like, I think that what that means is a yellow is forgivable, but if it had been a red, there can't really be any arguments. I think it could have gone either way, frankly. Again, it's one of those where you're like, I don't know.
You know what? If we're sitting here this morning and an Arsenal player had made that challenge and been sent off, there is not a hope in hell that I could sit here and defend them in any way. That's the way I would put that. Like, I can sort of see why the referee gave a yellow. I can also sort of see, based on the way games are officiated in the Premier League, why the VAR wouldn't have upgraded that to a red or told the referee to go and have a look. I'm not saying that's right, but, based on what we've seen and our experience of the way bad tackles are officiated or judged by these officials, I can understand why it stayed a yellow. But I really do think it's a very dangerous tackle. And Martinelli's a bit lucky. What did you make of him speaking to Sky Sports afterwards? And he said, in my opinion, if my foot was on the floor, he could break my leg. He said he didn't mean it. I believe him, but he still could have broken my leg. For me, it was a red. I need to see it again, but for me, it was nasty. You very, very rarely hear players come out and speak that frankly or honestly about a challenge that they've been on the receiving end of. And I think that says quite a bit about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's quite unusual. But I also think that's good. I think that's fair. No one's going to tell Gabriel Martinelli he's wrong. And I sort of think, I do think that within football, there are always going to be challenges and decisions that have a measure of subjectivity around if that is a yellow card or a red card. I watched Match of the Day, by the way, and they all seem to come down on the side of red card for that one.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet.
And generally, Arsenal don't get too many favours in sort of public discourse about officiating. Mm-hmm. So I think that's pretty indicative. But I also think, like, if you accept that bit of subjectivity, there has to be room within that for people to like state their opinion and push back and debate. And if it's given a yellow, like Mikel Arteta's within his rights to say, I'm sure he said it in less polite terms than this, but I think that should be a red. And Gabriel Martinelli is perfectly entitled to say that as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's right that players and managers and people who are subject to these decisions have a prominent role in the discourse. And I think players maybe above all else, because players have the best instincts for how dangerous the challenge is. They know, I think, better than anybody watching a replay.
We had a question, actually, on Blue Sky from Dan at dpowell.bsky.social. He says, do more players need to go the Martinelli post-match route to pressure PGMOL to take dangerous challenges seriously? Sort of an extension of what you've just said, you know?
Yeah, I do think that. I think that there's a risk with it, you know. I seem to remember Bukayo Saka coming out and talking about the treatment he was getting in games at a certain point in time. And I think, you know, that was used against him a little bit. Not so much, I don't know if by officials, you could debate that, but maybe more so by other fan bases as a sign of kind of vulnerability. And maybe players don't want to
that's it.
do that. But I think like, what is a yellow card and what is a red card? As much as we like to be like, it's clear, it's black and white, it's definitive, there are hard lines around it. I actually think it is an evolving conversation all the time. And I think the views of the players should weigh the heaviest in those debates. So I think good on Martinelli for saying it. And it's not like he hung the player out to dry and was like,
no,
he's a disgrace, he must be banned. Do you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
He just said, I feel that should be a red card. It's a reckless challenge. And I think good for him. And if it does influence the discourse or the decision-making process in the future, then that's a positive upshot. I mean, by the way, we had other questions to this effect, like Nick Baker, who said, morning, fellas, how high on the if that was Granit Xhaka scale was Norgard's challenge on Martinelli? I think Granit Xhaka would have been probably arrested, I would say.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. It is a classic of the if that was Granit Xhaka genre. Thankfully, Martinelli was okay, but it was a nasty one. It really was. And I think Norgard is quite lucky to have stayed on the pitch, and Brentford quite lucky to have had 11 men all the way through. Quite ironic, given that we finished the game with 10 men. We'll come to that. Second half, we score the kind of goal that we don't usually score. It's, how often have we sat here this season and talked about, the way Liverpool, all of a sudden they're defending and then they get all these men forward and suddenly within 5 seconds they've scored a goal. Why don't we ever score that goal? Well, we did at the weekend. It was a very, very well taken goal from back to front.
By the way, how much this was part of the plan, because Brentford, I know we are set piece FC, of course, set piece again, LA, but Brentford are very good on corners, free kicks. They really load the penalty area. They offer a real threat. And throughout the game, it seemed like when Raya got possession of the ball, he was looking for the early release. Right? Like he looked for Martinelli directly a couple of times, didn't he, with like a long ball over the top. And so I wonder if they looked at that in Brentford's game and thought they really do commit in these attacking situations on set pieces and dead balls. Like if we get hold of it, let's transition quickly. And we did. It was a great play from Raya to take the cross and then release Declan Rice. Yeah,
bowl it out to Rice, who skipped past the first defender, drove on towards the edge of the box, played it outside to Thomas Partey, who had covered a lot of ground pretty quickly to keep up with Declan Rice. And he applied the finish, a really great finish as well. So from back to front, it's just a fantastic goal. Yeah,
brilliant goal. I mean, Declan Rice, we didn't really touch too much on him starting the game, but he certainly didn't look tired in that moment. Incredible physicality and actually quite deft play. Like I really he took a little touch inside just before laying the ball off to Partey that gave Partey the space to come onto the ball and hit that shot first time. And I think, was it his 9th assist of the season, Declan Rice? So he's matched last season's tally of goals and assists. I think it's 7 goals and 9 assists for him this season.
Wow. Okay. So that's 1-0. And then we made changes, didn't we? We made a triple change.
Yes. Bukayo Saka among those who came
Saka... Who was it? Saka, Lewis Skelly, and
Martin Odegaard, I think.
Odegaard on, and Tierney, Zinchenko, and Nwaneri off. And you're sort of hoping that we could, with those players on the pitch, maybe step it up a bit.
Yeah.
It didn't really happen that way.
No, it didn't. We were a little bit sort of... I don't think we were worse per se. I just don't think we really experienced a lift in the way you might expect with players of that calibre coming on the pitch.
Yeah.
We did have a few issues after that may have affected things. Within about 5 minutes, I think it was, Thomas Partey came off, didn't he?
Yeah.
For Jorginho Timber. I must say, we're still waiting for news on Thomas Partey. We don't know what's happening. But as impressed as I was by that... 50-yard sprint to score, I was thinking like, oh dear. He's sort of the last player I'd want to see making that kind of run. That makes no sense.
Yes, I know what you mean. Hopefully there's not a big injury ahead of Wednesday, because I think we're probably going to be without Jorginho. We'll come to him in a second. But the goal that Brentford scored, I've watched it back. It's one of those where you go, it's just kind of a bit sloppy all around. Maybe we let the cross come in a bit too easily.
I think that's the worst sort of error. Because I've watched it and I'm like, well, it's not great. It's a second ball, isn't it? For a dead ball, for a set piece. And I do think effectively they just don't get. I can't, the number 33 it is who crosses it in. I'm not.
He was the substitute back.
I've been quite impressed by him actually, but I don't really know him as a player.
What's his name? Coyote.
Coyote. There you go. So he's just got an absurd amount of space really when he gets played in by Mbeumo to pick out whatever cross he would fancy. They've got an overload at the back post. It's a very good finish, all that said, I think.
I really like him, I have to say. I really like
Wissa,
as a player. Because if you watch the goal we score, like he's one of their forwards, and he is the guy who absolutely just sprints back. Maybe he could get out to Thomas Partey even if he makes that decision, but obviously he's got to try and contend with Declan Rice too. But that willingness to work for his team was just so impressive. It's a good finish. He scores good goals in the box. He's just really, really dangerous, and he can leap like a salmon, as he showed a few weeks ago, sort of hanging in the air to head home for Brentford. So, yeah, it was going to be him or Mbeumo if they were going to score, and it was him.
So that was about 20 minutes left to play at that point in time.
Yeah.
But Brentford obviously pretty delighted, I think, to be at 1-1 at that point.
Should they have been 2-1 down when Flecken got caught with the ball right on the edge of his box? Like, does that feel like the kind of chance that a fully fit, in form, full of rhythm Bukayo Saka just takes, rather than, taking the extra touches that he did because, he's still maybe a little rusty from all the time he spent out? Yeah,
I wondered. I've watched it back. I was behind that goal, and it did seem like there was a brilliant opportunity. He takes the ball around the keeper, or takes it off the keeper, is probably more accurate to say. And I think there is just a split second where if he gets the shot off, he's got a very, very good chance of scoring. There's a moment's hesitation, and then the chance goes away. Maybe a bit more sharpness in front of goal, and he scores there, or has the composure to.
I think is not even composure. I think what happens is those instincts are sharp, And he just does it without thinking too much. And I think maybe in that situation, maybe the first touch isn't 100% what it needed to be. But yeah.
Yeah, that was probably the moment, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to think if there was anything else particularly.
Well, I mean, he had a chance towards the end, didn't he? He had a chance which went wide of the post.
Yeah.
But we finished the game with 10 men because Jorginho, I could see him at one point, he was sort of down on his hunkers, you know? And I was going, geez, he looks very tired. And I know he doesn't play that often, but, you know, he should be all right. And then someone gave him the ball at one point, and you could see he really did not want the ball. He did not want it. Whatever he was feeling or whatever was wrong. I don't know exactly what happened. Someone said there was like a clash with Mbomo, and he fell awkwardly, maybe broke a rib. If that's the case, he's 100% out of the game against Madrid on Wednesday, because
it's very painful, and there's almost nothing that can be done for it.
No, just strap up, take some painkillers, and wait. That's all you can do, really.
Yeah, so. I once did mine by challenging someone to punch me as hard as they could in a bar. I was like, honestly, like, hit me as hard as you can in the stomach, in the abdomen. And
they went a bit high.
Yeah, and I think I was certainly aware of it aching or being sore for about 6 months. They're horrible things.
Yeah, no, I did it playing football as well. Just a guy going into a challenge, and he sort of went in under my arm, sort of caught me with the shoulder right on the side of the ribs, and you could feel the like. And it was probably 3 months before I could play again. And it was it's very, very, very painful. Everything that you do with your body hurts.
Yeah. Laughing
hurts, coughing hurts, moving hurts. So if he's broken a rib, I wish him the best of luck, but that might be the last we've seen of Jorginho this season, which is a bit of a shame. And obviously, having just brought on Mikel Merino for Declan Rice, we were down to 10 men for the final part of the game.
We were.
Good job. We've had lots of practice at that, though, in fairness.
It was all leading to this, Andrew. The master plan. And kind of, I mean, trying to think like back to like what the prevailing attitude in the stands was. I think even though we were down to 10, most of the fans around me were still hoping we might, conjure a winner from somewhere.
We had a go, to be fair. We didn't just sit back. We did have a go. And
it wasn't like, some of the games with 10 men, maybe Brighton being an example, where we sort of thought, right, what we have, we hold, let's sit in, protect. We did try and go on and win the game, but just not enough. And interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot of isolated reasons why Arsenal didn't win this game. We've spoken about Madrid, we've spoken about the rotation, we've spoken about the injuries in the game. But equally, it does also form part of a wider pattern, where a team came in, defended in a low block for long periods. We didn't find it easy to break them down, and ultimately we've drawn again.
We've drawn again. Another draw.
Yes, 12 draws now in the Premier League.
I mean, I don't think this game, leaving aside the the context of it between the two Madrid games and everything else, I don't think there was much to learn from this game that we didn't already know. Another
Certainly
draw.
Not. No.
Another game where maybe you're looking at squad depth, particularly in the forward areas of the pitch, not quite being what you need for games like this. Because, the reality is, if we want to continue improving and developing and continue on this trajectory, we are hopefully going to have more games between big Champions League games that we hopefully need to win, to stay in contention at the top of the Premier League as well. That's got to be the next development, right? When Mikel Arteta thinks about these games next season, if we have a Champions League quarter-final against, a big team like Real Madrid or Barcelona or Bayern, whoever it might be, and there's a sort of a game in the middle of that, you want to be in the title race as well as being in the Champions League. So when we think about what this squad needs, I think this game was illustrative of what we've kind of been saying all season in terms of attacking depth in particular.
Yeah, and actually that's the theme of our last few seasons, really, that we've only been able to focus on one competition. For the last couple of years, it has been the league. This year, by the time we get to the run-in, it's very much the Champions League, and the league's not so much of a concern. So, yeah, I think, like I say, I think it's a kind of isolated, unusual game, but there are some familiar themes that make it part of a wider pattern. Yeah.
So, a draw, Liverpool win, not unexpectedly, against West Ham.
Winner, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, I think so.
But it's your year.
That's it. There was more fun further down the table, I think it's fair to say.
Yes, a lot of fun, a whole lot of fun. It'll be a good episode of the 30, I imagine, this week.
Yeah, we'll have a good laugh at that. But we did get some requests for a bit of hashtag fun. Did you have a look in the bad place?
Oh, I've been fishing.
Yeah. I like this one. I'm not going to do the names because anyway. People saying you can't blame Ange for the individual errors today. Who plays football like this? I guarantee you ask any one of them players, should we play like this? They'd all say no. His shit tactics leave us exposed, put us under pressure. Don't allow our balls. Hashtag Ange out.
This one, Tottenham no longer sets my heart on fire. Watching their games feels like a waste of time now. I've supported this team for 13 years, but this is the first time I've ever felt like losing is just expected.
This one, I'd take Tim Sherwood back in a heartbeat over this Aussie idiot, or AVB, or Santini, or Ramos, or Christian Gross, or Jerry Francis, or Nuno. Clearly the worst manager I've seen in my lifetime manage our club. Just make it stop. Hashtag Ange out.
This one is quite mad. It just says, disgusting fanatics who have supported this pig. You stupid fanatics have ruined Tottenham.
I don't think it's them, really. No. I think there might be wider issues. Wolves scored 4, missed 3 basically open goals, so it could have been 7. They were 17th! How do you go to the 17th place team in the league and almost ship 7 goals in 94 minutes? How? Head explode emoji. Hashtag Ange out.
I saw that one as well. Fantastic. What can I say? Good luck, Vinay, I guess. Good luck, Vinay.
Well, listen. I can't go that far. I can't go that far.
That's true. We can wish him well, but we can't wish him luck.
That's exactly it. I don't want to get like a parking ticket. I hope he doesn't get a parking ticket. In that sense, I wish him well.
Yeah.
But, for the rest, sorry.
Agent Vinay.
Agent Vinay. Is he in place already? Because he could be doing a very good job.
Yeah.
Some might say.
Deep cover.
Deep cover, all right. Okay.
When they give Ange his new contract, we'll all just give a knowing wink to Vinay. Good on you, son.
Has Ange been sacked yet? We are out on the Europa League with him in charge. Prob's better off with no manager at all. He's that bad. I had him down as the worst manager in our history. He's officially the worst manager to complete a minimum 2 seasons of management in the Prem. Hashtag Ange out.
Officially the worst.
Officially the worst. The graphic came up on Sky Sports, I think.
Wow.
So there you go.
He's 32 games in. They are 15th in the league.
Having lost
points.
17 games this season.
Will they get to the magic 40-point mark?
It's just a shame There have been so many other much worse teams.
It is, yeah. Like in some Premier League years, we would be seeing United and Spurs embroiled
in a relegation battle,
in a true relegation fight. Unfortunately, I think the Premier League's got a real problem with promoted teams going straight back down. And I have to say, looking at the Championship this year, I fear, because I think it's 2 years in a row that 3 have come up and gone straight back.
Right.
And that is a problem, I would say.
It's not good. It's not good.
So the main reason it's not good is it's keeping people like Spurs in the league. So that needs to be addressed.
Exactly.
We need these promoted teams to be more competitive so Tottenham can finally be relegated.
I mean, I don't want to blame necessarily Southampton and Leicester and Ipswich, but they've let football down.
They've let the game down.
They've brought the game into disrepute, frankly.
I know,
by being really, really bad.
Yeah. All they had to do was win a few football matches and we could be staring down the barrel of a Manchester United and Tottenham double relegation.
Oh, my God.
Never mind. But listen, there's still plenty to enjoy.
The feeling of missing out on things this season is pretty high, isn't it?
I know, right?
Oh, well.
It's supposed to have been our year, and yet we can't even see Spurs relegated.
God damn.
Infuriating.
All right, well then, I think we should probably take a break here. I'm going to get a big cup of morphine to ease my nerves.
Okay.
Soothe my aching limbs. We'll be back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Blue Sky at gunnerblog.bsky.social and at arseblog.com, and also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. And a reminder that this month, in the month of April, we will donate every penny that we make from Patreon to 4 really, really good causes helping people all around the world. So if you want to get that extra content and help those people and support great causes, you can sign up for just $6 a month at patreon.com/Arseblog. So there you go. I did want to start on this one. We had a little bit of Vinay chat at the end, but Cartoon Steve Bold says, did you see Gary Neville try to suggest Vinay joining Spurs was a sign that something wasn't quite right at Arsenal? And I did see a lot of our American friends complaining vociferously about NBC adding Gary Neville to their Premier League coverage this weekend.
Yeah.
But that's a really weird assertion, isn't it? That Vinay, who left, how long ago? A year ago? Well over a year ago? And joins... what's that got to do with us at this point?
No, I agree. Vinay joining Spurs is no reflection at all on Arsenal. I mean, he's been out of the job for some time. He's been doing other things. It's not like he's left one to go to the other. I did see this Gary Neville clip, and I also saw the reaction. I have to say, I didn't feel as strongly about it, but I suspect that's because I'm kind of inured to him at this point in time, because we are so exposed to him. And I think maybe for the people of America... it came as more of a shock.
Don't they have enough going on at the moment without this too? That's
a very fair question. So yeah, I did see it. I mean, I was chatting to Ali at the five-a-side about punditry before the game. We were talking about different pundits, and I think Gary Neville has kind of told you, not you personally, but has told us where his punditry is at. I've seen him say, well, when I first came out of the game, I knew all the players, I knew all the coaches, I understood the way teams set up, the way they trained. I was able to provide a level of tactical insight that was unrivaled. But the game moves on so quickly, and he now has been out of the game for, I don't know, a while, right? Maybe retired for a decade. I'm not sure.
Must be more.
and he basically said that has forced the nature of his punditry and analysis to change, to become more broad. And I mean broad in every sense, broad in sort of like, sweeping brushstrokes, but broad maybe in terms of appealing to sort of a lowest common denominator at times. And I think that's just borne out, and it's something he's actually said and admitted. I just sort of feel like you have to kind of take it for what it is.
Sort of like when someone shows you they're a twat, don't expect them not to say twat things.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, people, I've worked with Neville and Carragher and the overlap and Sky, and so people may say I'm kind of compromised or whatever, which is fine. But I watched the clip and I was like, I didn't think it was that bad. Like, he basically was saying he thinks Arsenal have regressed a bit this season, and they needed to be the team to capitalise and win the league if Man City didn't, and they haven't. And I those points, like, I'm like, I think you can debate the regression, but the point of like, should we have been the team to win a league when City didn't? I can't argue with that. I think that's
but it doesn't work like that. It's just because one thing happens doesn't mean the other thing is going to happen. There is the randomness of sport. I do think your point about, he retired in 2011, by the way. I do think your point about, where he was at the start of his punditry career versus where he is now is a really interesting one, because I think, listen, when Gary Neville was a player, there is nobody I would have enjoyed spending 2 minutes on a football pitch with more than him, because, get right in there and do a kind of Norgard tackle on him, right?
a few orange cards.
High orange
out for you in that game.
Exactly. Yeah. I would have loved to do to Gary Neville what he and his brother did to Jose Antonio Reyes, right?
Sure.
I would have enjoyed that a lot. When he first started punditry, it was good.
A breath of fresh air.
I don't know about that, but it was good. I will admit that. And you have to sort of grudgingly admit.
A bit like how Man United were good,
And now,
we didn't like to admit it, but it was true.
And now here we are 15 years later, and both Neville and Man United are shit, and it's a great point. But I do think your point about the way the game has developed, like I think it's basically him and him alone is sort of creating this narrative about how football isn't that entertaining anymore and everything's too mechanical, too robotic, etc., etc. Maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe there isn't. I happen to think it's all very subjective. Like, if you're a Manchester United fan like Gary Neville, you're not going to be enjoying football very much at this moment in time. Whereas if you're a fan of, I don't know, Newcastle, who won a trophy, or Nottingham Forest, who are having a brilliant season, your experience of whether football is entertaining or not is a very, very different one, right? But I think there's something in the tactical development of the game that he has become detached from. It's not the game that he knew. Therefore, I think that is reflected in the things he says and the opinions that he holds. And I do also think, with all due respect to everybody at Sky Sports, that there is I don't know if it's deliberate or a concerted effort, but it feels like they understand the temperature of the internet fan culture in a way, right? So that maybe certain things are said to generate the kind of debates and clicks and engagement that is so important for those broadcasters. And I think he is one of the best / worst at that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, it's fascinating, actually, because, we all watch a lot of football, and we all are subjected to a lot of punditry, and we all have opinions on when it's good and when it's bad. Neville and Carragher are always lumped in together. I actually think, like, if you were looking at like the way in which they engage with games, if you watch Carragher on a Monday Night Football, for example, I think he's still much more attuned to the tactical side.
I would agree.
Neville is now. there are lots of reasons to not like Jamie Carragher, and Arsenal fans, as a rule, don't. But I think that he does still have that level of attention to detail. But it does seem to move so quickly on. I mean, Neville was kind of revolutionary on television when he retired, 15 years ago, and now feels outdated and outmoded. And so maybe the lesson here, and it's a lesson Sky probably should have learned after the Andy Gray and Richard Keys stuff, is like you need to refresh,
shelf life,
to move on. Yeah, and maybe the cycle goes much quicker than anyone anticipates. The problem is you build these stars. So Neville's now a guy with huge media profile that brings eyes to Sky Sports and its social media channels and things like that. So they won't want to dispense with him, and that's why you get situations like Graham Souness still having opinions on a game that he hasn't played for decades.
Yeah.
So, it's a really interesting one. The other thing is that, again, I was having this chat with Ali, and he was kind of saying TV companies are a bit behind. So, when you talk about the tone of TV punditry, it's almost as if they're seeking to ape fan culture, fan coverage of games.
Sure.
But maybe from like 5-10 years ago. Whereas now, actually, and Ali cited Mark Goldbridge as an example, fan coverage is maybe being a bit less biased, or a bit less, like someone like Goldbridge is sort of branching out into more objective football analysis and talking about other clubs, and similarly, AFTV have launched their channel, which is not just about Arsenal. And I do think that if you look at online coverage, it's becoming sort of maybe a bit more nuanced, and the TV companies perhaps haven't quite caught up with that. They're operating a few years behind.
Yeah, maybe. I would counter that by saying that I think maybe some of that pivoting to unbiased coverage of games, if you like, is more about the monetization than, anything else.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. People can do what they want to do.
I'm not suggesting they've done it out of some sort of moral.
No, I know what you mean.
Position, but yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Like it's always lovely when people say to us, like, "Well, why can't Sky be more like, the Arsenal content that I listen to?" But then part of me's like, "Yeah, but we are playing to our crowd." Do you know what I mean? We're saying everything. Well, we're seeing everything through an Arsenal lens.
Of course.
And there's always going to be that sort of like irritation. But Robbie Mustoe, is it Robbie Mustoe who's on US coverage? And he kind of comes back to Neville with a pretty reasoned, detailed, thoughtful response. So there are people out there doing it. It's just, are they getting the platform, the direction? Is TV being produced the same way for them to express those opinions? I don't know. I'm told, someone said to me the other day that, for example, the BBC highlights of the Champions League, they were like, it's really good. It's a really good show. They have like Rory Smith and Ned Emanuel and...
Is this on the radio or the...
It's on TV. They've got access to the highlights now.
I didn't realise that. And they were saying, like,
it's a really sort of neutral, objective, balanced discussion that's really focused on what happens on the pitch rather than sort of sweeping statements about club culture. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting, because there's not a ton of that on mainstream television at the moment.
That's true. I must check that out then. I didn't realise BBC had highlights of the Champions League.
I think I've got that right. I think, and let's see, BBC Joint Champions League highlights. Yeah, indeed they do. Obviously, normally I'm watching our games live, and I don't necessarily have great cause to sit and watch. If Harry Kane scored for Bayern Munich again. But yeah, I'm told it's really good.
All right. Have you got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question. Okay, we had some questions about Thomas Partey. A couple of questions about contracts, but maybe more interesting is like Milwaukee Guna. Milwaukee. I don't know how I'm pronouncing that, but say Partey is unavailable for Wednesday. Who would you start at number 6?
Rice,
baby.
Rice, baby. I think if we're accepting that Jorginho is not going to be there and Partey isn't available, then.
But what does that mean, Andrew? Does that mean taking Merino out of the attack?
Potentially, yeah. What else is there? Really, when you think about it, what else do you do? I mean,
I don't know. Some people will say Lewis Skelly.
Yeah, I don't think you can play or should play. Not that I would have any real fear about it, but I don't think you could ask or should ask an 18-year-old who has made a position his own this season by virtue of the quality of his performances, then sort of thrust him into that kind of pivotal midfield anchor role away at the Bernabeu against Real Madrid. That wouldn't seem sensible to me when you could have a really, really good number 6 in that position in Declan Rice. You can play Merino and Odegaard. It's a solid midfield trio. I know Leandro Trossard as the false 9 isn't necessarily everyone's favourite thing, and, you know, I thought he was all right against Brentford, but not much more than that. But this isn't a game we have to go out and score a load of goals in. So I think that solidity in midfield would probably be my way of dealing without Partey if he was unfit. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, if Jorginho was okay, that would be my first choice. I actually think, you know, it's a game where Jorginho could thrive.
Yeah, if he was okay.
If he was okay. And he looked probably worse than Partey. So I think I have to agree with you. Yeah, I think it's got to be Rice. And it does mean Merino dropping out, which I hope Leandro Trossard's looking forward to challenging for some long balls with Rudiger. But yeah, you know, I think that's kind of the only thing left on the table. I wouldn't move Lewis Skelly in there.
No.
As well as Kieran Tierney's done in his cameos, and as you know, as tempting as that might be as an option to put Tierney left back, Lewis Skelly in midfield, I just think it's a huge spotlight to place on a teenager in that particular position, in this particular game state as well.
Yeah. I mean, we had another one about Wednesday, which we might as well talk about. It comes from MC McFootball.
Yeah.
He says, what's the protocol for Wednesday? Do we need to do exactly what we did for the first leg, or does the game being away instead of at home mean we all have to change the kit we're wearing wherever we're watching it? And he said, by the way, I think you thought MC Football was some South American rapper, but I'm just a pasty white balding dad from Canada who still uses the same email chat handle he had from high school. So there you go. MC
I thought he was going to say that he
Football.
was a muck like me, you know, because I'm bald, pasty dad, but I'm not Canadian. And that's not my email.
I got a bit of sun on Saturday, so I'm not pasty.
Okay, are you red?
No, not
That's
really.
good.
Not really.
That's good.
Soaked it all in. Got that overdose of vitamin D.
Delicious. I don't know, man. It's such a tough one. Like, I don't think there's another opponent in the world, maybe Liverpool, where you could win the home leg 3-0 and still have room for as much doubt as I have room for.
Yeah, we were talking about this on Saturday, weren't we?
I've told The Athletic that if it gets to 2-0 Madrid, I'm leaving the stadium. I've made that very clear, that I will not be remaining in the press box.
And they said, okay, James, no problem, yeah?
Yeah, they're fine with it. It'll make for a good piece. It's a good intro. Now, I genuinely, like... my sort of mantra I keep repeating is don't concede early. I feel like your mantra maybe is like score early. That
would be my preferred mantra, score early and then fucking relax a bit. But, you know, that's easier said than done. And it's sort of, it takes away from the question a bit as well is because what is Mikel Arteta's message to his team? You don't want to just sit back against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu because they can really hurt you, and you don't want them to get a load of momentum and start peppering your shot or your goal with shots, etc., etc. You just do not want to do that. But at the same time, you don't want to leave yourself exposed at the back. There's no need to sort of push high up the pitch and press them really high up the pitch, leaving space to get bypassed in midfield if they can do that. That's why I do think the midfield is really, really important for this game, because they're without Camavinga. Maybe they get somebody back from defence and they can put Valverde into midfield again. I'm not sure. But, you know, if it's Modric in there again and you've got Rice, Odegaard, Merino, or Partey, Rice, Odegaard, whatever it might be in there, I think you have a very good chance of not necessarily completely controlling the game, but making life difficult for Real Madrid in midfield. So it is a really tough one, isn't it? I don't know what kind of team talk I would be giving the boys if it was up to me.
Yeah. I just think, well, yeah. If Madrid score in the first 20 minutes, I'll feel quite sick, I imagine.
Yeah. I don't think you'll be alone.
I just know, like, I've never experienced it myself, never been. But I've seen through the television enough times where that stadium kind of gets its tail up, as it were. And that horrible kind of sense of destiny begins to swirl around the Bernabeu. I think, what is the team talk? I guess in a dream world, Arsenal play as they did on Tuesday night, you know, and they're dominant and threatening and physical and all those things. But as football fans, we know that's just so much harder to achieve away from home.
Yeah.
Because of sort of magic alchemy that's not easy to understand.
I guess it will be just keep it tight, don't do anything stupid, don't give anything away early on. You know, I think we are a good defensive team organisationally. You know, we are very disciplined, and that should make it difficult for Real Madrid. So I think that's kind of the strength that you would expect us to lean into. But it's finding that balance between, you know, letting the opposition have the ball and not doing anything stupid with it. Don't give it away in our own half. You know, those transition moments that can really, really punish you. So maybe we see a bit more Arsenal being a bit more industrial. I don't quite know, you know.
Yeah, I guess that's it, isn't it? Don't do anything stupid. Like, we know, for example, if we get a couple of free kicks, well, even direct free kicks now.
Yeah, they're going in top corner.
Then this is as good as a goal. No, but, you know, they struggle in those situations and we're very good. I think if we stay in the game, you know, we've always got a threat with Saka and Odegaard, you know, players who can hurt Madrid, Martinelli. I just think don't do anything stupid. Just don't do it. Don't give away a penalty needlessly. Don't get yourself sent off. Don't lose possession in your own third if you can avoid it. If we don't do anything stupid, we'll be okay. That's my honest opinion.
Yeah.
I think if we put in a good performance, we won't get beat 3 or 4. If Madrid go through, we've fucked up somewhere, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
That's my analysis, guys.
Well done. I enjoyed this one as well from AFC Till I Die on Blue Sky. And he is AFC Till I Die, or AF... Anyway, it doesn't matter. His thing is there. He says, hey guys, have you heard about the conspiracy theory that because of the FIFA Club World Cup, FIFA won't want the winner of the Champions League to be a team that's not in it, and therefore we might see some dodgy refereeing calls in the upcoming games this week? I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. And such a good sound effect. I think Well, and then at the end, the referee, he pulls off his face and it's Howard Webb. PGMOL have infiltrated UEFA and the conspiracy is alive. I hadn't heard that particular theory.
Serious question before you go on with this. How many times did you hear referenced this weekend in all the conversations you had with people over the weekend at football? How many times did you hear Robin van Persie at the Camp Nou referenced?
Yeah, probably half a dozen, I would say.
Yeah, same.
And I think the perception exists that Madrid have had some favourable calls over the years in the Champions League, much sort of like a Manchester United in the Premier League in the 90s. And I would be inclined to agree. I think, that if there is a kind of subconscious bias within the Champions League, I think it probably lends itself to the big Spanish teams. So that's always a worry. And also you've got, 80,000 fans or whatever it is, screaming for every decision from the first whistle.
Yeah.
Which we know can have an impact. So, yeah, I worry about that too. I worry that in a season where so much of the narrative has been about officials and officiating, that it could be the case again on Thursday morning. But I don't know. As I said, yeah. Hopefully we're not using that sound effect.
Yeah, hopefully.
But yeah, the Club World Cup theory is not one I'd come across. Is that one you'd come across?
No, absolutely not. I just thought the question was kind of funny.
It is.
Gives us a chance to use that sound effect. So there you go.
Well, yeah, it was well worth it for the sound effects. I thought this question was quite odd, actually.
Okay.
So London Gooner said, the quality of our attacking football, I guess against Brentford, again, was so poor. Our lack of creativity is painful to watch. I don't feel you ever talk about this on the pod, but feel it's a huge issue. Can count on one hand the amount of enjoyable league games we've watched this season. I feel like we talk about that all the time.
Me too. I think we've referenced the need to improve the quality of the attack. We've certainly had countless conversations about creativity when we've talked about, let's say, left eight. Is that the kind of is that the position where we could add somebody who's a bit more Eze, for example? And there's a name that's been mentioned more than once. We have undoubtedly talked a lot about Martin Odegaard and his, not just his form this season, but his absence this season, our difficulty in filling that gap when he was absent. The fact that we left or let Emile Smith-Rowe and Fabio Vieira go, two players who could have played in that position. So I think we certainly have talked about those being issues, and this summer has to be built around that, I think. Creativity and attacking potency are the two things that I think this team needs, and we've said it more than once. I mean, we've even talked about, that kind of maverick individualism that you get from somebody like Alexis Sanchez.
We have, yeah. I mean, also, I there is that thing where we're doing a podcast after every game, so it's like you become wary of sort of just doing the same podcast every week. I sort of think that's such a big theme that we've probably talked about it slightly less, just for fear of repetition.
Yeah, I mean, we can't really give anybody anything more insightful on that, because I think it's an opinion that is widely. Maybe wildly too. Maybe some people are wild about this. I think among most Arsenal fans, there is an acceptance that up front and just behind, in terms of what we do in terms of creating chances, has been the major issue this season for various reasons. Injuries, suspensions, lack of transfer activity or the wrong transfer activity last summer, etc., etc. So, what can we say?
I think what's interesting, because the last sentence, it says, I can count on one hand the amount of enjoyable league games we've watched this season. I feel like maybe that touches on a slightly separate issue, which is like, are we boring? Which is, I think it's kind of like, it's one of the big taboos as a fan to be like, is my own team boring? And I think, obviously, no one's going to say that when you beat Real Madrid 3-0. There couldn't be anything less boring in the world. But I do think there is a sort of interesting kind of style question around not just Arsenal, but I happen to think Gary Neville is actually onto something when he talks about, the modern game, what the sort of positional style of tactics has done. For years I said I found Man City quite boring to watch, and now you've got a lot of a lot of coaches trying to emulate that, often like wildly unsuccessfully. So I think there is something in that, and I think like I think maybe as well, like for Arsenal fans who grew up watching a pretty different style of football, that there might be I can understand questions over like, is the way Arsenal play football sufficiently entertaining? But equally, there are a ton of people who don't really care about that as long as we win, and who really value the structure and stability and defensive rigor and all those things that we do have now, and see that as a sort of worthwhile trade. So
no, I think it just sort of is a reflection of where we are in the league table as well, to an extent that the accusation that maybe we've been a bit boring or not very entertaining at times is probably a bit true. But again, without relitigating all of it, there are so many reasons for that, why games have been a grind, why it's been difficult to find rhythm. When you're missing some of your best players for long periods of the season, it has an impact on what you do and how you can do it. But if at the same time we had found across, how many draws have we got now? 12?
Yeah.
So let's say in 50% of those games, we had just that little bit extra in attack to get one goal. I don't think there'd be too many people talking about how we were boring, because we'd have how many extra points? 12?
Sure.
So, it's fine margins. It's fine margins. I get it, but, I can see it from both sides.
Exactly. And I think, because I know you mentioned Forest as like an example of like a group of fans who would say, their football hasn't been boring this season. And I think that's definitely true. I mean, they must be absolutely loving life. I also just think stylistically they are quite different to many Premier League teams, and so they sort of are entertaining to watch. But
I do wonder. Yeah. I mean, it must be hard though as well when a lot of your game is based on sitting in and counter-attacking at pace with some brilliant counter-attacking players, right?
Yeah.
With the pace that they have. But there's got to be a lot of like knife-edge stuff. You get all these highs of these exhilarating moments and these breakaway goals, which I think, essentially are unsustainable for a team like Forest. I think they've punched way above their weight. It's been brilliant, but I think they've punched above their weight. And I think I said this to somebody at the weekend, or maybe on a pod last week, I can't quite remember. But I think they'll probably end up outside the top four. Because you just can't sustain it. So while it has been certainly entertaining, I do feel like if for example, Arsenal were to play like that, people would absolutely hate it,
Yeah, that's true.
So,
yeah. And they won't mind finishing outside the top four if they come fifth, because...
Oh, yeah, it's 5 teams, isn't it?
That could land them in the Champions League. But, yeah, it's an interesting area. Over to you.
Over to me. Okay. What about this one? Questions about Kivior, but I think we've sort of answered questions about Kivior and his future already. The Chili Most, who's at chili-e.bsky.social. He said, last week, post-Everton, Arseblog mentioned injuries to Odegaard, Saka, Jesus, Martinelli, Kai Havertz as wrecking our season, especially in attack. Given Merino's goals, has his August injury been overlooked? A big what-if, yes, but if fit and integrated from the start, could he have been our missing piece?
Looking back at the start of the season now to see what points we dropped. We dropped points against Brighton early on.
10 men,
much
Rice.
more about 10 men than anything else. We dropped points against Man City. 10 men. And I still don't think that's a bad point in any circumstance. Whatever sort of season City are having. And then the next points we dropped were against Liverpool, at the end of October.
No Saliba.
Yeah. And that, again, that's not a bad point. And then by the time we played Newcastle in early November and got beat, was Merino back by then?
Don't know.
Sure.
We did lose to Bournemouth before we drew with Liverpool as well, though. But that was a 10-man situation.
Oh, yeah.
Marino started the game.
Marino started that.
Against Newcastle.
No, listen, I love finding another reason to explain why we haven't won the league as much as the next Arsenal fan. but I don't think that is one. I have to be honest. I think that coming from another club, there was always going to be a period of adaptation anyway. I'm not sure. Yeah, I just don't look at those games and think Merino playing in midfield would have been the difference. I don't know. What do you think? It was a bad injury.
It was a bad injury, and I think, the sort of double whammy of it was that he was involved with Spain all the way to the end of the Euro, so didn't really get a proper pre-season, comes to a new club, gets injured. Would we have got a bit more out of him? Probably. I think over the course of the season, he's shown himself to be a very good player, I think. Maybe not exactly the player everyone wanted, or maybe not the player some of us would have liked to have seen in that regard, but he's made a big contribution this season, I think.
But is it fair? I genuinely don't know the answer to this. It's not a loaded question. Is it fair to say that only really happened when he started playing up front?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like we haven't seen, I guess, what he was brought in to do in midfield. We haven't seen that.
There've been flashes.
Flashes, but,
We've not seen it consistently.
No.
And I suppose what I'm saying there is that, like, he wouldn't have been playing up front in August. Do you know what I mean?
No, for sure.
And actually, I think you make a good point about the Euros. I think that was probably as problematic for his acclimatisation as anything else.
Yeah.
I think that would have meant he would have taken a bit of time. We saw with Declan Rice, it took him a bit of time to get up to speed. So I think it would have taken Merino a bit of time, injury or no injury.
Yeah. Okay, I think we better leave it there for this episode. We did have a big question about the Denver Nuggets. It comes from Sports. That's a great name on the Discord.
This was an interesting question.
I'll read it out just very quickly and we'll do it. He said, morning lads, this might seem unrelated, but I'll bring it back around by the end, I promise. The Denver Nuggets, which is KSE's NBA team, just cleaned house and fired their head coach and general manager with a handful of games left in the season right before the start of the playoffs. They won the title a couple of years ago. They have the best player in the world. I don't know who that is.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Just gone off.
Spanish vibes.
They have the best player in the world, yeah.
The best player in the world, and their coach was the fourth most tenured in the league, so this is entirely unprecedented. Trying to think of a Premier League equivalent, it would be almost like if Liverpool had fired Klopp for the run-in last year, or maybe if Newcastle decided to fire Eddie Howe tomorrow. Bring it back around to the part that really impacts us. Josh Kroenke has stepped in as interim head of basketball operations. What impact might this have on what is going to be a busy summer for us, given that Josh will certainly be more involved in basketball operations than he would have been previously? Will Berta and Co be more free to do their business, or will a distracted Josh make life harder for them?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I didn't know this. And wow, what a fascinating development for Josh to be seemingly so hands-on. It's not the reputation of the Kroenkes, is it? But basketball is Josh's game.
Yeah. He's a tall guy with arms.
Played to a decent standard himself, I think. I think he played for his college, maybe. And yeah, he loves the Nuggets. So
chicken nuggets.
I know, right? Who doesn't? But, knock on at Arsenal. The only thing I would say about Arsenal is that sometimes people dealing with Arsenal have expressed to me a frustration at kind of like the layers of decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're waiting for an offer from Arsenal, but they've got to get it signed off by the board. The board only meet once a week. Therefore, we're kind of treading water. That's sometimes something that agents or other clubs might express.
Somebody, within Arsenal who's, maybe a young person, up on the technology, could they show Stan and Josh and the guys how to set up a WhatsApp group?
Believe it or not, they do have WhatsApp group. They could just do like a WhatsApp. You can do polls within it now.
Yeah.
And that's how they could make the major decisions.
Sign Isak, 150 million.
Yeah. If you can't get it across in the question of a WhatsApp poll, then what are you doing?
Exactly.
So basically, my sort of sensible answer is the only way it could impact Arsenal is if it reduced or impacted Josh's opportunity and availability to sign off on stuff. But I don't really see that being an issue.
No, me neither.
Especially with, as you say, modern technology being what it is.
Yeah, and a big summer and a shiny new sporting director, or shiny little sporting director, I guess.
Well, he'll be a busy boy, yeah. He was at the game again at the weekend and on the pitch, wasn't he, against after Real Madrid. Came up behind Mikel Arteta, gave him a big slap on the back.
There you go.
And he'll be back on home turf, this week.
Visit
to his old stomping ground of the Spanish capital. But yeah, I think he's been busy since he came into the job, really busy. And I think he's a man in a hurry to make an impact. So hopefully the board and the ownership are able to facilitate that.
All right. Right, we had better leave it there. Safe and successful travels to you, James, going out to Spain.
Thank you. Well, yes, as I say, if it goes to 2-0, I will be home quite early, I should think.
Just get the bus.
Straight to the airport.
Yeah, exactly. The same to any of you guys who are listening, who are flying out. I know loads of you who are going out there, so have a great trip. Fingers crossed it's the right result and we can look forward to some more special Champions League nights. We will preview that game tomorrow over on Patreon, and also on Patreon later today. We will look back at all the weekend's Premier League action in the 30. Some games, not naming any names, Wolves, will get a bit more coverage than some of the others. So please join us for that at patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, though, take it easy. Thanks as always for being here, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.